Hey guys, welcome to another tutorial. Today we're gonna be working with a country house scene. First, we're gonna start with a line drawing. This is gonna be made with a normal pencil. After that, we're gonna be using oil paints diluted with solvents to create the underpainting. Once we finish with the underpainting, we start with the details on the structure. Later we work on the middle ground. We have a little river crossing the scene. And finally, a couple of ducks sitting in the foreground. So first, the line drawing. We need to be really precise with this one because this is going to be the foundation for everything that comes afterwards. So take your time, be patient, and try to be accurate in terms of details. After we finish with the line drawing, we can start blocking in big masses of color. Now I am using Viridian green mixed with Prussian blue and a hint of zinc white mixed with solvents, of course, to create the green masses. After that, I start with the house. The house is going to use a mix of terra rosa with zinc white. The zinc white acts as a transparent white, so it's really useful for the blocking stage. And of course, we mix the paint with some solvents, turpentine, and you can use a bit of some oil medium also. It could be linseed oil, for example. Again, with this one, take your time. We want to stay within the lines, like if it were a children's coloring book. Okay, after we finish with the blocking stage, we can start rendering the sky in the background. First of all, I apologize for the autofocus. It was not in manual, so it's a bit wobbly in the following seconds, but it will get better in the future. Okay, so back to the sky. Now I am working with the background, let's say. There's a windmill in the corner, and I'm trying to be really detailed with this one because I'm not gonna be retouching this later, so I'm trying to get it right from the start. After that, I am going with a couple of trees that are in front of the windmill in the middle ground next to the house. I'm trying to add a bit of variety into the brush strokes there. Once we finish with the trees, I move to continue the structure of the house. Now I am using a really thin brush to enhance all the details that I made with my pencil. Essentially, we want to keep those details. We don't want to lose them behind our brush strokes, so I reinforce them with some burnt umber before I start coloring the house, because otherwise you lose all the detail in the mat of paint. The line drawing, especially when dealing with architecture, is your best friend, so it's important to keep it alive as much as possible. Now I am working on the cast shadow that is made by that part of the roof that is going down. For that, I am using raw umber to lower the value of that part of the wall. After that, I move into some of the details. Now I am going to render one of the little light lamps on the side of the house. For this, I am making the drawing in raw umber, and I'm using zinc white mixed with a bit of ultramarine blue and a bit of also titanium white. Titanium white, unlike zinc white, is more opaque, so using a mixture of both is really good to have a paint that flows properly, let's say, because titanium is really stiff, but you also get the opacity of titanium, which zinc lacks. I am using the same mixture to create the texture of the tin roof, so we need to be precise on those lines. I am using a really thin brush, trying to have a steady pulse. If A steady hand is something that you need to work on. You can use always a stick to help you steady that pulse. Okay, after we finish with the house, I move into the grass layer. Let's say I am enhancing the greens using viridian green, and for the dark part of that little scrub I am using Prussian blue mixed with alizarin crimson. It gives a really deep tone, which is really useful for those shadows on the vegetation, let's say. Same here, I am starting with this really dark mixture. So remember, it's Prussian blue mixed with viridian, and you can also add some alizarin crimson and or transparent oxide red. I find that these colors are best for creating the deep darks needed for the first stages of vegetation. After I block in those darks, I go with a tiny brush and I am reinforcing the outline. This is important because we need to make this particular shape pop out. So creating an outline with this dark mixture is gonna make it sort of a 3D effect popping out of the canvas. After we do that, we start building the particular leaves and branches and all the texture associated with this particular type of, I don't know if this is a shrub. So here we need to think in terms of, okay, what's the shape of this branch? How would it look like if it were, for example, a cone or a piece of fabric? This is something an exercise I usually do. Imagine if this shrub was composed of cones, and all the little branches are individual cones. This is really useful for creating the 3D effect. Now I am working on the shrub that is next to the house, and for this I do the same. I imagine each one of these individual branches being little cones, and that is gonna help me apply the paint correctly where I need it to. After I finish with the shrub, I move in with the tree on the left side. So we start with the basic underlying structure for the trunk and the branches. This is going to be done with the dark mix of raw umber and a bit of viridian, and maybe a hint of some ultramarine blue to create it a bit cooler. Then we add some zinc white to create the texture of the surface of the tree, all the little intricacies. Finally, we continue with the branches all the way up. Switching brushes, of course, we need a finer brush to create some proper branches. It is important that when we are dealing with the finer touches, we need to use a smaller brush. This is unavoidable. Okay, after the branches are completed, we start doing what we call the front layer of the tree. This is gonna be the leaves that are closer to the viewer. This way we create the 3D effect. We have the back layer, we have the middle layer, and we have the front layer. Front layer is gonna be where we put all the texture, and for that I am using a bit of a thicker mix of paint, and I am applying it with the side of this long bristle brush. After we finish with the tree, we can move into the middle ground with the riverbank. This is a small little river that crosses the scene, and now I am focusing on creating all the vegetation that is very characteristic of riverbanks. So for that I start with the dark mix that we were using, raw umber mixed with a bit of transparent oxide red, and some alizarin crimson. And now what I'm aiming for is to create as much texture as I can with the brush. So for that we go in layers. First I'm going to do a first base layer of as much texture as I can, using various angles with my brush. You see me twisting the brush there. This is really important because we need this part of the painting to be really chaotic in a sense, representing all the individual grass and different vegetation that is growing a bit chaotic, in a chaotic way. That texture is gonna really be one of the focal points of this particular painting. Now I am switching to a finer brush with long bristles to create the individual grass strands that are almost the highlight of the piece. For this I am using cadmium yellow with a bit of zinc white to give it a bit more fluidity. Try to be as precise as possible. Take your time with this because it's gonna be one of the highlights of the piece. And now I work my way back and doing a bit of the highlights of the water there. For that I am using pure titanium white, and try to be not overdo the highlights of the water because it might start to look a bit fake. Okay, now we move into the foreground. Here I'm going to be applying more texture to the grass compared to the grass on the middle ground. Essentially, the closer we are to the viewer, the more detail we want to add. This is going to give that impression of perspective. So take your time, try to do the brushwork necessary. I am mixing different colors into the grass. I am using greens, I am using yellows, I am using some reds, some earth colors also. Okay, now to the ducks. For this one I'm going to be using a base layer of terra rosa, trying to do some brushwork that is hinting the feathers. It's important that we get the color right from the start, otherwise we need to scrape some paints and start all over. A bit of zinc white might be useful at this point too. Now I move into some of the highlights and details, of course. For this I am using a mix of cadmium yellow and cadmium red, which is basically cadmium orange, and a hint of zinc white for some of the feathers. Here in the head we are putting pure cadmium red. This is a feature of both ducks, so I'm placing in the second one too. It is always useful to use the outline as a way of making certain shapes pop out of the canvas. Look at the difference when I start applying that bit of a dark outline on the duck. It makes it sort of 3D in a way, popping out of the canvas. For sure, it's something that we need to use, not always, but sometimes it might prove very useful, especially when we need to make something part of the focal point. So I will be using this on both ducks. Now we go into the second duck, and for that I am going to be using a base layer of ultramarine blue and raw amber to create the first block in of the feathers. The neck is going to be zinc white mixed with titanium white and a bit of blue also. I'm trying to be precise with the shape so as not to have to correct later. I'm hinting a bit of the legs there, and I'm going to be using a bit of the same technique with the outline like I mentioned before. This is going to make it a bit more 3D in a sense, and it's a more refined shape when you apply an outline. The outline also depends on the light source. In this case, because we have a diffuse light source, we can apply an outline almost in every direction of the contour. But usually when you have a strong light source, the outline can be only used in the shadow part of the shape or the figure that we are representing. Okay, everyone, this would be all for this one. We do a bit of a detailed analysis of all the different parts that we've been working on. I've done some modifications to some of the areas. I really enjoyed this project. It was really interesting, especially the middle part or on the middle ground. And that's all, guys. I hope to see you in the next one. Take care.